Hi, Stefano. It's great to talk to you about this wonderful subject. I'd like to start right back at the beginning, where you first got interested in music at all before you thought about becoming a collector. I imagine maybe as a teenager or around your
Yes, yes,
childhood.
like probably all youngsters. No, I was born 64, so I came in like everybody, I think around 14, 15 years. I'm not out of a music family, whatever. I was left very free to get there. I play saxophone, I play guitar, so my parents were very open to that. But it came, I discovered my music. And I think this period was we wanted to go out dance, so this was first contact. Now the discotheque now came, and it was already very U.S. driven. Now I was very interested in this Motown sound who came in, the dance music, chic tramps, this kind of thing. And the other, we live very close to Milano. Milano is some 30, 40 kilometers from here, from Lugano. And I used to escape from home to go there to see concerts. And that was the way. And in these concerts, I saw persons and musicians, and I bought their records. No? We had a record shop, as everybody had in small villages too. Not today, it's difficult even to buy records. This was much more easy. So the Saturday afternoon was at the record shop to buy records. This was the entry. So I was a little bit playing music, but I was especially interested in the live part of music.
Yes. Actually, I've seen a photograph of you at home or you with your record collection, and it looked like there was a Gibson 335 guitar
Yeah,
or one of those in the
you
corner.
you saw it very nicely. It was like this, yeah. This then in the 80s we used to have a band and we play music and these kind of things. But the entry was, I find out my way, so it was not given like having parents playing music, or my collection is my own collection. So it was not somehow from my father or from my mother. The entry, yes. When I escaped to Milano, the first concert I saw, it's amazing. I saw in the same year I saw the Weather Report concert, so the 8:30, no, and I mean this was already something spectacular, no. You may remember, no, this it was then live music registered, this quintet, Joe Zavino, Shorter, and then what impressed me a lot was Johnny Mitchell. I fall in love with this beautiful lady, you can imagine, and she was registering 79 the Mingus record, and I bought them. These were my first records, beside maybe some Beatles and Stones records. But to go to the jazz, and the interesting in both were with Jaco Pastorius on the bass, which is some kind of a guru, at a certain point. So this was my entry somehow.
Yeah. Yes. And then you got diverted by becoming an engineer, I think. That's become your life's work.
I had to earn my life. I made a family and whatever, and it was useful. I have my own business, so you can imagine it's a little bit more easy to like today, just in the afternoon, to have your time, whatever. And I'm basically a planner. I'm an engineer, a planning, urban planner, and this helps me a little bit to be systematic. Let's say, nothing against creative people, but the engineer is a systematic, and collecting it's helpful to have a little bit a systematic approach towards. Thousands of records, you could get lost without any kind of systematic. Again, this is my job, and this passion now, collecting, is a kind of life balance. You need to do something beside only working. Working is nice, but it helps me a lot to do this.
It took you a bit of a while to come to this point, didn't it? Because it was maybe 20 years later after you'd started collecting, well, the vinyl records and things that you bought as a teenager. But then there was a particular event, I think, involving your mother's house, your parents' house, which actually brought you to the point of doing this extraordinary, having this extraordinary hobby.
Yeah, it was my mother just saying there is a box full of this kind of strange things, vinyl records. I will throw it away if you don't come to get it. And we are the CD-ROM generation. Also, somehow when I was 20, we were told the vinyl is dead. So the CD is the future and perfect quality and lifelong lasting and whatever, and so it passed somehow 15-20 years. I got my 100 records again in my hands, and I said, wow, this is interesting. It's different as a CD-ROM. Then after came streaming and this virtual thing, and I had this immediate reaction to have something in my hands. And you could look at it. It had a picture in front, a photograph, and especially the liner notes behind. You could read things, and somehow, let's be honest, it could be even a religious discussion about quality. But I still think vinyl sound is a more interesting, warm sound. Of course, you have to have the right hi-fi. So I bought back all my things of my early years, so a hi-fi. But I'm still convinced it's a nice sound too. So the whole thing together, this object you can look at, read it, keep it in hands, and the sound itself made me then jump again 20 years later in vinyl records.
And as you looked into this more deeply, as you began to collect records, I think you began to get an idea of how the record had originally been produced, and how that affected what the entire package of it was. I think you said to me the other day, we were talking about this, that there was a quartet of people in record labels like Blue Note and Prestige and Riverside, who always tended to come together to make these wonderful products. Could you tell me what that quartet consists of?
Yes, this is the interesting thing. So basically there is always a producer, a supervisor, and I mean we could tell anecdotes and stories about that, but they had to go to brown houses to buy back the instruments. Most of musicians, no, not most, some of them were drug addicts. They just gave away their instruments. So the producer had a hard job, to keep these stars together for 2-3 days to record. They were all special persons, obviously. And then what was in my eyes always crucial, I mean, the whole Rudy Van Gelder story. I mean, the sound engineer, he made the sound, the way he registered, the way it was reproduced. I mean, most records are still signed on the vinyl by Rudy Van Gelder. I mean, he was controlling a quality. By the way, it's said that the ratios, the Esquire ratios of the Prestige records are better than the US originals because they were made from the original on better vinyl. So it's said that the UK issues are better quality, but they were made with the original recorders and supervised with Rudy Van Gelder. So the second one was obviously the sound, and the technology made a big step in the post-war period, obviously. And then, as you normally turn a record, there are liner notes. And I mean, the world before internet and Google and whatever was a question, where do you had your information? And it's like a library of history of music. If you read these liner notes, there is plenty of information, and most interesting person who wrote them, I mean, Berendt, all this famous musicologists who made this. So the third one is certainly the liner note person. And then my passion, obviously, I discovered that I somehow find out that the package counts. And this story of the package that counts, so the graphic design, the art director was the fourth one. So they could be, maybe the supervisor was the art director or whatever. So it could be also only 3 person, but the rules were always this 4 person who put together, obviously beside the musicians, the content. And this package was my passion, or is my passion, not the thing that it's not only about the music on the record, but how it's packed. This is how I discovered how records were made. And the story about this Blue Note and Prestige is fantastic story, no? I mean, people who escaped from Europe in the 30s and got to America and made these record companies. There is a whole of a story behind that also, of transatlantic relations, no? So it went from Europe there, and then it goes back and all the way back again.
But before we move on to talking about the exhibition and your fascination with the way these American records were repackaged in different parts of the world, just one thing I wanted to ask you about the way the idea of the package came to be. I mean, I've got old records from the 20s and things where they're just in a brown envelope, pretty well unmarked. And then this idea of selling records, of marketing records by their appearance and their design, that seemed to come in later.
Yeah, I think it's in a broader frame that this happens. I think this is post Second World War, where things get industrialized, commercialized. We could do the same. Food was never packaged before, no? So Switzerland has a food industry. I mean, you sell the same content differently in China rather than in Italy or whatever. So it was a commercial industrialization process who had everywhere a little bit this question, how do you package things? And you went to the butcher and you did not have meat in a package, and records became very early, I think, a broad industrial product. I mean, it went to every family, and it was pushed to be a commercial product. Behind were record companies who wanted to basically make money. I know it's always difficult. We talk about art, and art is a little bit pure, but there is a commercial story behind it. Package has something strongly to do with selling, commercial, public relation and commercialization. And I think it goes in this broad frame that things got a package to be sold.
So you began as a collector at what point? I mean, from the point at which you rediscovered this box, or a little later than that?
Yes, I started to look at this product. Let's call it product. I know, again, it's hard in art to talk about product and commercial, but the disc, the vinyl record as a product. And I started to wonder how it was working, and came obviously to this period, the 50s, 60s, where I think things were useful and nice. I mean, cars is the same, no? Cars all look the same now. They are much more better, but cars were nice in the 50s, in the 60s. And I started to get interested in, of course, as the first thing, you fall onto Blue Note. Blue Note is Blue Note. I mean, everybody knows. But I soon discovered that Blue Note was somehow a high-level step. It was when artists were famous, it was very professional, whatever. And I very quick fall onto Prestige. I discovered that Prestige was the ones who brought in artists. I mean, all Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, Sonny Rollins came in by Prestige Records. They were discovered there, put on the market and whatever. And obviously I find out an interesting world. The covers of it, so covers of Prestige, are art objects, And there is quite a lot of literature about this, so I started to be interested about these art designers. Then I did in 2016, a first exhibition, which was a little bit prestige, was interesting for me because once they had this new jazz artists, they started to go back to the question of roots of music. So they started to have a Bluesville series, which is one of the most beautiful series of blues recordings in my eyes. And then they had all these international things. I mean, they produced flamenco music, considering it as somehow the roots of this American melting pot, no? So the things who came in and whatever, and all with fantastic covers. And then I got sick, no? Obviously, it's a sickness, no? I wanted to have all of them. Obviously, as a collector, you start to be methodically into the deal, no? And the step afterwards was discovering the reissues of prestige on an international level. But it was a stepwise approach to what is now a passion or whatever, a paranoia, you could tell, whatever it is now. Collectors are a little bit sick, obviously.
And of course, one of a central feature of this exhibition that is taking place in London is the Esquire label, which was begun in the late 40s, was it, or early 50s,
yes,
by
yes.
Carlo Kramer,
Carlo Kramer,
who was a working
40s.
musician too.
Yeah.
What do you think were the characteristics of the repackaging of these prestige albums by Esquire? Do you think there was a certain Esquire house style, or was it very much down to whichever artist happened to be in the office that day, or whatever, like it was accidental?
Yeah, it's probably both of the things. I would first say I was interested anyway in the theme of the reissues because it goes back to my commercial packaging story. So I discovered that in the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Italy, in Argentina even, there were reissues and the covers were not the same, and I started to wonder what's happening. No? So the record, the songs, the musics are exactly the same. There is no attempt to make something else from the content. And I started a little bit to wonder, and I got a little bit in the story, and I found out two things on Esquire. One, I was personally fascinated by, let's call it just a different art design. And somehow I would say it's difficult to express it a little bit. Of course, prestige is serious or whatever. It looks a little bit more amazing, interesting. It looks like it has probably could be the British way, no? A little bit more of humor. But I talk as a Swiss, no? I don't want to make too many judgments. It's just very much different. And what impressed me a little bit was that rather than in the US or even in Italy has a lot of consciousness about design, no? The Italian design, furnitures, whatever. I found not a lot of awareness of British design, which made me a little bit suspicious. So I can't answer exactly if it's because it was not a school of design and just people who made Ralph Steedman became famous and afterwards for his cartoon designs. Valerie Wilbur is still very famous as a photographer. Some others, I mean, Disley was a musician, no? And he made covers, could be also more a casuality. But I think, and this could be another discussion, are they better than the US original? I would just say different. And in my eyes, but this is a rather question to you, do you see the British thing inside? And I have not a lot of books or whatever discussion about. Some people say it's a little bit poorer than the US. I don't agree. I think it's British in my eyes as a Swiss.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think that's true. I mean, I think using something like Stedman's cartoons or that cartoon style for a cover, and the way Diz Disley did his. I think that there's a kind of, as you say, there's an element of humour in it. There's a willingness to be a bit more informal and perhaps not so obviously artistically serious about the presentation of the image. Yeah. So I think that is a difference, yes. Although I think also there's clearly something that's happening through the artists that are available to be used. I mean, like Valerie Wilmer is an absolutely wonderful photographer of musicians, because you don't just have somebody blowing a trumpet into a microphone in a spotlight. You have a sense of the person's inner life. You have a person, yes. I agree completely. But in my eyes, obviously, it's the other way around. I would say these artists, they must have had the idea to talk to the local market, the UK market. Probably they had their language to talk with. Unfortunately, or maybe this is the interest of this exhibition, is just I don't see a discussion around graphic design in the UK of the 50s and 60s. Yeah. I found things around the railways. So the railway had a huge idea of corporate identity, but it's not as I'm used to, let's say, the Italians or whatever. The historic artistic discussion is still not made in my eyes. I think that's true. You know, in Britain in the 50s and maybe into the 60s, there wasn't really a profession of being a graphic artist. It was you were called a commercial artist.
Yeah.
Okay. You even went to colleges and studied commercial art, and I think there's a bit of snobbery in that it's like there's art, creative
real art,
and then real art about the soul.
And now my easiness about how to approach this thing is obviously I'm younger than that. And I'm away. I can look at a little bit from distance to that thing, and as I said, I'm completely fascinated. Don't ask me if it's better the Esquire UK reissues or the US. It's just two worlds. But this is the message. It's two worlds, and it's the same content of music. This is so interesting, no? And this must be this commercial story, no? I mean. Some of them still are alive, no? I mean, this is to find out what they were doing. I mean, most Andy Warhol was just living off the jobs he got to make covers. Paul Baker made in 10 years probably thousands of dust covers of books and records covers. He had an enormous production. Probably he got $1 per cover or something like that, and he just made a lot of them. And then it starts to be art and story and culture, no? Maybe it's always this way, no? And the spontaneous approach you can see in Esquire, I like a lot now, 60, 70 years later. This is about what I think is interesting to look at in the exhibition.
Indeed. Actually, Ron Atkins, who also features in your exhibition, and he worked for Carlo Kramer and Esquire before he became a civil servant, before he had a job in government offices and things. And I accidentally became a jazz critic because he was writing about jazz for the Guardian newspaper. And he was finding it difficult to combine that with his other life. And he said, "Would you like to do some jazz reviewing?" So that's how I fell into this. Yeah. And he also he's very funny about occasionally being roped into doing covers for Esquire when he had no graphic training at all.
Yeah. Maybe there is one thing also you mentioned about the 20s. Of course, the big step also which we should consider is obviously a technological step too. I mean, in the 20s we had shellac records. I mean, they just fall down and they broke in 1,000 pieces, no? I mean, the vinyl, the hard technological industrial product who makes them really lifelong, not the CD-ROM, but the vinyl is lifelong, also made it possible to have this industrialization process behind, which was not possible in the 20s and the 30s. And the other thing is, obviously, in post-war, Second World War, you had also, from the technology of design, you had new things. I mean, colors, photography itself. No, photograph was, and printing technology. I think in the 30s it was difficult to print a photo on a cover. So there is a lot, maybe beside the commercial question, there is also a certain innovation aspect who took place after Second World War. So there was a technology, the overlighting of photos, the collage techniques, and the possibility to print in color, these kind of things.
And also in the technology of printing and reproduction of artwork, a lot opened up when the technology allowed people without access to a printing firm or any of that to be able to do their own work. It would be possible to produce a very sophisticated piece of artwork at home. And to reproduce the photographs instead of having to have a printer make a block out of copper or something like that to reproduce it. So it liberated the whole thing.
The technology innovation probably was also a quite important aspect from the 20s, 30s to the 50s, 60s, this possibility. And this maybe creative thing that they were trying to make money, they had a job, and they maybe at the home table they made some collage or made wrong photographs and discovered that this could be an art process. This makes the whole thing also interesting. It's a creative aspect too, and that's again why I was so fascinated about covers.
Yes. Can I ask you two more things, Stefano?
Yes.
We must be drawing a little bit towards the end of our time, I think. But one is the question of being a collector and an enthusiast. Sometimes people, I do occasionally run into people who don't think they like jazz music very much, because they will sometimes say, well, it's just for enthusiasts and people who have this very rather peculiar fascination with something that only a relatively small number of people know about. And do you think there is an element in being and having a collector's mind or a very fine sense of the detail of things that perhaps takes one away a little bit from the communal sense of sharing music, which a lot of people who are perhaps pop fans and stuff feel, well, a part of the thing is being with masses of other people and enjoying it all together.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, let's put it this way. I'm anyway a music addicted. So my collection is not only jazz records. So, but I could ask you, what is jazz? No, I mean, it's for me. It's kind of what was interesting. This Paramount Records in the 20s. What for us is now the holy grail of jazz recordings. This was popular dance music. And when I said I jumped in going to dance, it was a little bit Motown. Is it still jazz? Where do you put Frank Sinatra or Al Jarreau? Of course, if he plays with Count Basie Orchestra, it's jazz. But shall we keep Frank with us in jazz or whatever? I had rather a little bit the popular dance music. Of course, then it's getting, you have to learn to listen to Anthony Braxton saxophone solo. My mother got mad when I put this record on, but I used to think it was a very nice musical record. But after a while, you have. I think we fall into a trap with this discussion already many years ago. I still think jazz should be considered popular music. John Scofield, Country for Old Men. It's a thing you could dance to it. My wife dances country music and she thinks this is dance music. But John Scofield is jazz. So my collection is, let's say, I would say half of it is a pure what we could say jazz, no jazz, whatever it is, no, but jazz. So, but where shall we put all the bluesville records, the blues records, and they also came back to the UK, no, and then from the UK they went back again to the States. I mean, the Americans lost their culture. It was the Rolling Stones and John Mayall who discovered again the bluesmen and sold the record back. No? So I think it's a dangerous discussion. It happens with jazz enthusiasm that they consider them a little bit on the other side. I think music is popular music all the time, and it can be a little bit more difficult. I have Stockhausen or Edgar Varèse records, so probably it's difficult to listen to it if you're not used. But I used to dance to music. It was maybe more Motown. And this cover story could be also a way again to find a little bit an escape to this discussion being put in. Miles Davis has tried now the Isle of Man concerts, no, to try to get in again in the rock business, no, which he tried at least, no. But in the 20s it was different, no. You know the story about the Wisconsin Chairs Company. So there was a man who made chairs, no, in the lake regions, and he wanted to sell more furnitures, and he said I could sell more cabinets to have. Because it was made of wood now, and they said, how can I sell more cabinets? And he made Paramount Records and went to the south to register these bluesmen who made dance music now. And this was now for us the holy grail now of the jazz story now. So it's difficult to give you an answer, but I don't feel kept into a specialist's room because I never wanted, because I also listen and collect other music. So maybe 2,000 of my records would be what you call rock pop music. I was a youngster, so also in the 90s. I mean, I have a lot of punk records. I mean, the punks were UK, you know. we got this music from the UK.
Well, that's fantastic, Stefano. I really very much appreciate it. And I've already said one more thing about bringing in people to this music can happen by all sorts of routes, and making new fans and new enthusiasts for this music. And I think your exhibition is going to be one way, must already have been, and many other exhibitions you've done, a way in which people discover it. If they've maybe not heard the music before, but they look at these beautiful pictures and these fascinating covers and think, well, maybe I'm going to go and check that out.
Yeah, thank you. But this is my wish. No, I mean, it's a little bit the frustration of the collector. No, what is a collection if you can share it? It's just you have a lot of things, but it gets interesting when you can, with an exhibition, share it. And I have a little bit this hope to say maybe people can come into music also on the visual part of it. So, how I take a joke of myself now, I watch records now. This is a little bit the way I try to explain. So you can maybe then say, okay, it's a nice record, I listen to it too.
Well, we're going to be coming and watching records with you when you come to
okay,
London.
It would be a big pleasure. Yes.
And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, John, too. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.